Mhm. All right. I think slowly, but surely, maybe we can start. Yes. Hello. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is our first ESAC Talks of the year, and we are really excited to host it and share it together with our esteemed speakers and with our guests. My name is Unique Bagdi, and I will be your host for tonight. I am the programs manager of the team who organizes this ESAC events talks event series, and I have a pleasure of moderating this event on the behalf of my wonderful team, which is made up of my beautiful program officers, Sophia and Anna. Um, before we start, I'm going to share some words about the ESAC itself, if this is your first event with us. So ESAC is the European Student Association for Cultural Heritage. It's a dynamic network of young professionals, students, and researchers who are passionate about cultural heritage. We foster knowledge exchange, connecting emerging voices in the field and create opportunities for collaboration. I'm going to briefly share some housekeeping rules with you as well about the event today, just to know what to expect. So we will have three wonderful speakers tonight who will share their expertise on underwater heritage. And after their presentation, we will open the floor for questions in the Q&A session. So please keep your questions for the Q&A sessions and discuss it at the end of the presentations. This event will be recorded, so if you feel uncomfortable with being recorded, please switch off your camera. Now, let's move on to our lovely event and to our lovely speakers. We are very, very excited to have Underwater Heritage as our first talks theme of 2025, especially in regard of Water Heritage Day, which will be on this Saturday. In the heritage sector and in light of global challenges such as climate change and rising sea levels, the protection and preservation of underwater cultural heritage have never been more urgent. From submerged cities to shipwrecks and sacred sites, these traces of the past tell vital stories about human history, trade, and migration. Safeguarding this heritage is not just about conservation, but also about strengthening the resilience of coastal and maritime communities. As students and young professionals, it is essential for us to learn more about this. Now I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelist who will start this evening with a keynote speech. Please welcome Dr. Professor Martijn Manders. I hope I pronounced it right. He is a maritime archaeologist and a professor of underwater archaeology and maritime cultural heritage management at the Leiden University. He also works at the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands, focusing on underwater heritage in international context. With over 30 years of experience, he has led major projects, including the excavation of the VOC ship, uh, which called the Rooswijk, sorry for my Dutch, and the warship of the Klein Hollandia. Dr. Martens is an expert on underwater cultural heritage management and serves as a board member for the International Committee on Underwater Cultural Heritage. Thank you so much, Martijn, for accepting our invitation for tonight. And right now, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope you can hear me well. You understand me perfect. Now I do something which is very frightening for me, which is starting the presentation because that went wrong quite a few times earlier on. So let us see how this goes. Yes, I think this must be going well. You can see it, right? This is the first slide. If you don't see this, the second slide for a long time, then please put your hand up and tell me that nothing is moving. So I thought, what am I going to say in 10 minutes about underwater archaeology, which is as big as terrestrial archaeology, if not bigger, but people still don't know that. So if you think of a career change, do it in underwater archaeology because the next coming years there's so much work coming at us and there's still a lot of it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to present you a little bit of an insight in the development of underwater cultural heritage because I know, or underwater archaeology, because I know that I'm mostly talking to people who are not maritime or underwater archaeologists. So that's what I'm going to do. But first of all, I always start with, and I'm very annoying. I start with definitions, and I always want to start with definitions because I hear so many things that are quite wrong, but I go through it very, very quickly. In the first definition, you see archaeology, and actually, this is one of my the things that annoys me most, and that's that. Also, a lot of my colleagues tell me that there is archaeology in the ground, or we can find archaeology. Well, we can't find archaeology. Archaeology is a profession, and that's what you learn at university. It's the tools and the methods that we use to investigate traces and objects in the ground. So we find traces and objects in the ground, and if they are very special, or if we think they're very special, or if a group thinks it is very special, then we call it cultural heritage, and otherwise we don't. So sometimes I think something is a cultural heritage, and other people think it's not. The other two differences I want to make is underwater archaeology and maritime archaeology, and I do this also for the sake of the presentation. Underwater archaeology is, as it says, is doing archaeology underwater. So it's a technical profession. It doesn't say much more. So if I tell you that I'm an underwater archaeologist, it only says that I can do archaeology underwater. It doesn't say much. If I'm talking about maritime archaeology, that's a completely different ballgame. That is the relation between people and water. I can do that underwater, but I can also do that on land because a harbor place or a city can also contain a lot of maritime heritage and therefore also maritime archaeology. So that's just quickly what I want to say to you. And I'm already 3 minutes underway. So I have to hurry up, I see. So basically, what I want to do, I want to divide the history of archaeology, of maritime or underwater archaeology, into 5 sections. But what we have to keep in mind is that if we talk about underwater archaeology, we talk a lot about discoveries, and that the discoveries in underwater archaeology and adventure, they go hand in hand in development of maritime and underwater archaeology. And what you also have to understand when I'm telling you these different stages, of course, they are following up on one another, but they're not exactly chronological, and you will find out what I mean with that. In the meantime, you see some nice pictures in the background. The top one is a multi-beam sonar of the Rooswijk, the VOC ship. So this is the seabed, and these are techniques that we use to measure the depth. So we can use that to investigate the seabed while we're not diving. So that's always a good thing to have, because diving by itself is dangerous, and diving by itself is it's very expensive. So as I said, I'm going to divide the stages of underwater cultural heritage management and underwater archaeology into 5 stages. The first one is the initial discoveries and recoveries and underwater antiquarianism. Then we go to explorations, where divers and archaeologists work together. Then we get into the in situ mantra period, the industrialization of heritage, and the implementation of the 1992 European Convention, the Malta Convention, or the Convention of Valletta, as we also know it. And then we have a normalizing the way we treat underwater cultural heritage. So when we go into the initial discoveries, we can go back a long, long time of investigations on especially shipwrecks. And I give you a few examples. for example, 1535, when people were searching for the big shipwrecks in the River, and they had some underwater investigations by two Italians in 1535 already. But very famous, and you see the picture in the top where you see this cask of wood. You had John Lethbridge, and John Lethbridge was a very famous investigator who went underwater mainly to salvage very valuable objects from shipwrecks. And he was hired by East Indian companies, actually all over the world. He even went to South Africa. He came from the UK, from South Africa, to salvage things. So the underwater world is not just something from a few years ago. But when they started to do real archaeological research, that's actually in the mid 19th century, early 20th century. We have the pile dwellings of Latin Lake, nowadays one of those pile dwellings that is from the UNESCO World Heritage pile dwellings in the Alps. And of course, there's the Antikythera wreck, you know probably about that, which has this mechanism in it, which we still don't know exactly what it is. And that was excavated actually with sponge divers in first, and later on with standard divers, as you can see the lower picture with the guy with the helmet, to 50 meters of depth, which is quite deep. But we also have the Madia wreck in Tunisia, for example, which actually was also one of the first wreck where a famous guy called Jacques-Yves Cousteau started to dive on. Because we get into the second stage, and that second stage is where we have explorers. I say Jacques-Yves Cousteau, who was developing the dive systems in the scuba dive system, in which we could stay longer underwater and we could do archaeological research. That's what he did, or the best he could. We have, for example, Bob and Harold Edgerton, who did archaeological research underwater. And there are quite a lot of them. These people, they came from a passion, and they started diving on shipwrecks and investigate that. And slowly also archaeologists started to be interested. Terrestrial archaeologists, they saw the potential of what was there underwater. One of them was George Bass, later the founder of INA, the Institute for Nautical Archaeology. And what George Bass said, which is quite interesting, he said, you can learn an archaeologist to dive, but you can't learn a diver to become an archaeologist. So basically what he wanted archaeologists to become divers, so you could do underwater archaeology. So you see this clash coming from explorer divers who are diving on shipwrecks and want to know something about those shipwrecks, and they start to become interesting, to archaeologists who become divers. And that's what we still see in, for example, a famous club nowadays, which is the Explorers Club, where you see archaeologists and just explorers coming together and working together. And actually, that's exactly how we started in the Netherlands as well, where we had the Shurak as a big ship of the first excavation, underwater excavation, where we worked with sports divers together as well as archaeologists, and we had sports licenses, and that's how we did our research. But after a while, the law changed, and the avocational divers, sports divers, couldn't dive with us anymore. But that's exactly how we started, and I really see that I have to hurry up in time. Because the next stage, and that's a very important one, is the in situ mantra period. I don't know if any of you still have that, but in 1992, of course, we had the implementation of, the implementation of the ratification of the Treaty of Valletta. But also there were a lot of international laws that said that in situ preservation was the best thing to do on an archaeological site. the best thing or the first option. And this is how we started to develop methods to protect sites underwater with mesh or with artificial seagrass. And we did it for a very long time, but there's a downside to it. And that downside, there's different reasons to do in situ preservation. First of all, you preserve for future generations, but there will always be a future generation. We show some responsibilities. We had law that protected it. It is cost effective. And of course, when you discover a shipwreck, there is always a time gap between the discovery of the ship and the excavation. So in situ preservation is a good tool for management. And because there are so many dangers that are there underwater, which we usually don't see. There's sedimentation, erosion, especially the erosion is a problem. There's, of course, bacterial decay. There's Teredo navalis, the shipworm. And of course, there's humans that are deteriorating shipwrecks in a very fast rate. So we have to protect, which is really important to do. But there's another side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that we had a whole generation of archaeologists that never did any excavation. They didn't know how to do that. But also, no excavation means also there is no knowledge to gain. We were afraid to do anything. There was no knowledge to gain. There was also no selection. So we said everything is important. Keep your hands off everything. But we're not alone in this world. So we got into this path where we couldn't go on. And still we had growing expenses because we still had to monitor, and there was still ongoing degradation. So what do you do then? What do you do, for example, with those extremely well-preserved shipwrecks in the Baltic Sea that are still very well in very good condition, but they may fall apart soon? What do we do then? Are we keeping them still in situ, or are we doing something else? At more or less the same time, a little bit afterwards, we got this industrialization. So where the disturber paid, and what we saw is that we had a lot of in situ preservation, and the only excavations that were going on were the excavations that were done within the Treaty of Valletta principle, the disturber pays principle. So not necessarily the sites that were most interesting because you learn a lot from it, but the ones that were in the way and that other people would pay for it. So we didn't pay for it as archaeologists, but the client would do. And they were not interested in the stories, in the narratives. They're just interested in the fact that they want to build and they want to keep on building. So you see that there is this ambivalent situation where in situ preservation is one of the things where there is most responsibilities is for the governments and not for those disturbers. And on the other hand, you have the excavations that are usually drawn because there is a problem and not because you want to know more about a site. So now we're trying to normalize, and I'm really finishing up. We're trying to normalize the situation of underwater archaeology, and this is just at the moment. This is the moment that we're trying to do this. So we're really at the start of this, where we're trying to normalize and balance the thing. So we balance between selection and deselection. And so we're also saying wrecks that we're never going to do anything with. We don't do anything with, we're not going to preserve or whatever. We leave them, and they are possible to be used by other people. But excavation is not a taboo anymore. So we do that, we collect knowledge, and with that knowledge, we know more about the past, but we can also select better. We are getting better budgets from the governments to really do archaeological research because we want to learn and not only because there is a problem. And so there's far more pragmatism in doing that underwater archaeology. So, but guess what? There's one thing that we have to understand as archaeologists, also as other cultural heritage persons, but as archaeologists, it's very important that we're not alone in this world. But we are equally important, but there also has to be economical development. There has to be safety. So dikes have to be high, and we have to dredge places, and that means that some cultural heritage will be lost. And these were quickly in a fast view and 4 minutes too late. my presentation about the development of underwater archaeology, and I could go on for years, but I won't do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martijn. I hope we will have another opportunity to listen to your presentation in a more elaborated context as well. Thank you so much. Even though if you said that 10 minutes is not enough for talk about everything, I think you did manage to give a kind of to convey the essence of underwater culture heritage to us. So thank you again for your insightful presentation. Now let's try to move forward with our speakers. Our next speaker will be Alexandra. Sorry if I'm pronouncing wrong, but Mocioiu. Please
Sorry.
correct me.
It's Mocioiu, don't worry about it.
Mocioiu. Okay. You are an architect and a co-founder of Front La Dunare Association in Dorbeta Turnu Severin, through which you explore ways to create meaningful intervention for the community through the cultural and natural heritage of the Danube cities. So, Alexandra, the floor is yours. We are really excited about listening to your presentation.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen now. Okay. Is it working? Okay. First of all, thank you so much for accepting us to take part in this. It's a big pleasure for us because this subject is now really important in our development, and we have a project going on at the moment, and we will talk about it. But first off, I will start by saying some words about my team, Front La Dunăre. This is now the core team of the NGO. We started in Drobeta Turnu Severin last year, and so far the three of us, me and Alexandra and Cezara, we are architects, and Dragoș is now doing his diploma, and this year he will become an architect too. So the team is actually bigger. We started last year. We've been working in Drobeta on a fountain that we restored for the last years, and last year we just finished, and we wanted to go on with our interventions. Unfortunately, Drobeta, Turnu Severin, and many other Danube cities in Romania have been cut from the Danube, and the relationship of the people with the river itself is really, really poor. So now this is the area we are working on. So it's this county, Mehedinți, it's called, and our area of interest is this part of the Danube. Here is Drobeta Turnu Severin, and here is the island of Ada Calais that I will talk about really shortly, and Shimian Island. And yes, so Ada Calais is an island that has been submerged in the 70s. Maybe some of you know. If not, I will tell you about it. So in the 70s, the communists wanted to build this hydroelectric power station, and with it, many things got lost. The a lot of villages by the Danube, people, houses, they all had to move their place up in the mountains, and some of them just went away. So the area of interest for us is the island. Yeah, this is the heritage that I'm talking about. So the landscape got submerged, and a lot has been lost. This is the island, and today's subject, it's called Ada Calais. It has been inhabited since ancient times, but the most important period and the most prolific, I could say, is the one when when a Turkish community has inhabited this island. And so in 1524, this actually the Ottoman Empire has built fortification on this island, and this is the one you can see in the images. And then a Turkish community came and inhabited this island. And because it was forced to be demilitarized, and then this Turkish community came and inhabited the island, and they built their houses on the fortification itself. That was really interesting because in that period in Romania, the Danube has become a very important artery for transport and also tourism. And yeah, this island got the spotlight because it became kind of a paradise for people. So you had everything you could imagine, from coffee. The community really had an impact, and it was really, really rich, and people wanted to come and visit this place in the weekends. People from my hometown and people from other cities by the Danube came here to just rest and meet the Turkish community. And unfortunately, with that hydroelectric power station, it got submerged. Like I said, this is one of the last images we have where you can see it. This image we really, really like. It was made by a friend of ours, an architect, and you could tell this is the gate, one of the windows of the fortification. And this is the plan that I was talking about. The fortification was built in Vauban style. And here you can see the houses that were built by the Turkish community. We have access to a really, really nice archive from the Institute of Heritage of Romania, and we are now working on a project. I will tell you about it a bit later. These are some houses of them. And after it got submerged, the communists have proposed this project to move the community to another island that is really close to Drobeta Turnu Severin, where we work. So after we got our hands on this really big archive, we realized that actually the project wasn't about the Turkish community to move their houses. They didn't say, look, we have to submerge this island and to build this hydro central and build it again and do everything for your community. It was a touristic project from the beginning. And here in these images, you can see the process when they were moving the fortification from one island to another. And I will show you now the actual, the now present island where everything has been moved. I'm thinking now that maybe it would be helpful for you to see the distance between the two islands. Maybe I was a bit messy in my speech, but this is the island before, the Adakale, and here is the Shimian Island now, by Drobeta Turnu Severin. So they tried to move everything. They just moved a part of the island, but everything else is underneath here. Yeah, these are the images, and this is all you can see now. It is not, you cannot visit the island, and that's our main project this year. Me and my team are working on making this private, public, and a visitable place for people, and most important for the Turkish community with whom we are trying to get into contact and work with them to see how they see this project. These are some fragments that were rebuilt. Only the gates are original. Everything else, it's not. The current state of abandonment, people have been ruining the citadel forcefully. And yeah, some other images. This is also this has been saved from the island, so it's original. This is these are the stones, the funerary stones of the people that have been moved from one island to another. And this is our project that we propose for people to come and visit the island and to discover what has been moved, and to try to also activate this part of the city that has been cut away from the rest, the Danube part, which is really not put into the spotlight as it should. You don't have any public space by the Danube, so that is our concern now. And yeah, this is our project. And I will finish my presentation with this image that is really close to what Martin was talking about before. Uh, this is what he does. We got in contact with this team. They have done this image some years ago with the same um, um, with the same kind of um, tools, and now they agreed to try once more with much better tools and to try to give to try to achieve a better image. So yeah, this is a future project for us to try to discover what is underneath and to document it and to try to get in contact with people who know how to do these kind of interventions. So we could, yeah, maybe do a bigger research project. Here you can contact us and you can discover our projects. And yeah, I hope my speech has been clear, and I'm waiting for questions at the end. And I just have a small thing for you. For anyone who is interested to come in Drobeta this year, today an open call has been opened by the British Council. I will put this link into the chat for you. If you, it's open for researchers, for architects, for designers, for anyone who is interested, and I will put it in the chat for you. That is all.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I think it was really informative and really exciting how diverse underwater heritage can be, actually, from shipwrecks to submerged cities as well. And thank you so much for sharing the link as well. I think we can include all these contacts and links and projects in our next emails. So please do, if you have anything relatable to your projects, and we can spread the word. So our last but not least presentation will be given by Camille, and I'm going to need some help here with the pronunciation as well. So Camille Thorsted,
Yeah.
Krog.
Yes.
Yay! Okay. So welcome, Camille. You hold a master degree in visual culture from the University of Copenhagen. In recent years, you have worked in the field of archaeology in the heart of Rome, and currently serving as a maritime archaeologist, excavating the submerged archaeological park of Baia. Your team focuses on examining and the transformative aspects of underwater cultural heritage, which sounds really, really interesting. So, please, Camille, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will just try and share the screen. I had some problems before.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, please let me know. It's okay. Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much, ESACH, for accepting my abstract, my proposal. I'm very grateful to take part of this event. My aim for the presentation today is really threefolded. Even though we have very limited time, I'll do my best to stick to the timetable. First, I wish to present a very brief introduction of 3 different traditions we see in perceiving statues throughout the history of art. And with this go through, I will not only empathize on the sculpture's importance and the dialogue with its space-oriented position, as we will see, but I also wish to question the hierarchical statues that they contemplate in creating themselves. And for me to see this hierarchy change the very communicative elements, statue and observer in between. I hope they will be more clear for us later, which is not which will increased even further when the statues will be positioned underwater. A change of this hierarchy will therefore take me to the second part of my presentation, where I aim to show how such a change in hierarchy also is related to a more phenomenological experience of like the nearness, the feeling of relevance of the statue and observer in between. For finally, in the end, after this introduction, we can start the discussion of such a change in the perceiving of statues, how this can be more beneficial for a greater experience for the potential of learning in the sense of, or in the matter of paideia, which a debate that once again will be turned upside down with the fact that cultural heritage statues, that for my case, actually are copies. And thereby we can start questioning how we can really truly learn through a phenomenological experience, how we can really learn from history. So now, roughly speaking, we can differ this historical shift we see in the perception of statues from having a monumental statues with an overruling message on public squares we meet them to a more modernist statue when they're moved inside the museums, this white cube, before finally arriving at the more nomadic statue where the communicative elements are enlightened by the nature, as we also understand as land art. Since the time is very limited, it's important for me to empathize that this is a very, very brief introduction. It's a very interesting topic that I sadly don't have the time to go too much into today. So please bear with me being a bit generalizing here. So again, the first statue we will meet is the monumental statue. I hope you can visualize in the photos. They are often on squares. We often encounter them in the public squares. These statues are very space-specific, meaning they refer back to their surroundings themselves. The typology for these are that they are often put on pedestals, meaning that they create a visual hierarchy. Observer and statue, they are always looked from low to up. Yeah, so the hierarchy here is very, very visual, no? The second statue would be the modernist statue, the one we often encounter in museums in the red cubes. They were often more experimenting on the material rather than the space they found themselves in, and thereby the media is more important here. These statues, as I try to visualize with these photos, are often taken down from the pedestals themselves, so they're more in eyesight with the observer themselves, or now we don't call them observer anymore, we start calling them participants actually. And the communicative elements here will often be more dialogue based, we might say. Then the third statue, which the one is so important for us today, is the one that's named by the nomadic statue. Which it frees itself now from the previous autonomy that the modern statue, for example, had, and exists in a more open space in between the architect and the landscape itself, and thereby there per se does not invite to this hierarchical statues, this historical system, but more flows in between the relations. Communication-wise, this also indicates that the observer is giving much more freedom to decide how they wish the statue to be preserved themselves. And since this nomadic statue is often part of the landscape itself, you also as a observer are more bodily involved with yourself. In the recent years, we have now seen a greater tendency at diving spots, generally submerged archaeological parks, to install these statues underwater, for example, as we have here in Bahia, where I work. And this is introduced both for a more varied maritime life underwater, but also for recreational purposes for the observers to give you an idea of how it used to be. They call it a greater phenomenological experience, they often argue. So For my case today, I will introduce you, if you don't already are familiar with this incredible site, the submerged archaeological park of Baia, just outside of Naples in Italy. It's an enormous area where only around 8% has been excavated so far. Now, due to an enormous amount of activity of Braticism, the seabed has moved extremely up to around 270 meters. So everything, all these Roman emperors' villas, palace that used to be above ground, is now submerged. Concluding that we have incredible mosaic floors, columns, arches, wall paintings, frescoes, and of course the statues. The statues that will be for my case, we have 6 statues in what we call an Nymphaeo of Claudio. Those are the ones we saw here for the case too. Dating back to around the 2nd century, let's say roughly, and they're finding themselves, the entire archaeological park is around 3 to 21 meters depth, so can be reached also just by snorkeling if you wish. The statues themselves were found around 100 years ago by amateur maritime archaeologists by coincidence, and thanks to, we know this, the sand is really the best way of preserving stuff like this. So thanks to this sand, it was worked like they are in a phenomenal condition, really. After finding them, they started demolishing a bit. So therefore, in the 1990s, they decided to make some copies and move the original statues into the Museum of Baia right next to it. And therefore, the statues we see now in the archaeological parks, they are copies from the 1990s. Now, these variations of statues, not only of the copies here, but this short art historical introduction I did, does not only provide us with an understanding of this art historical orientated shift in statues and in their communicative forms, but to me, to say they also provide us with an understanding in the shift of their relevance, their hierarchical messaging to the perceiver themselves. So the observer, therefore, participates in a more communication of the media themselves. So the need for addressing a statue as something space-specific will no longer be sufficient enough for this debate, no? In a change on the act of the perceiving statues, we also need to now address how statues communicate the possibilities for this nearness, for a relevance, and conclusively also how they can change the very concept of paideia. Now, yes. Evidently, I wish to examine the potential for this paideia for underwater sculptures. Having now argued that with the different acts of perceiving and seeing statues and the changing hierarchies for the observer does not change the potential for learning. These arguments are based by Gadamer and also their inspiration from Merleau-Ponty, the French phenomenologist. Now, the greater the hierarchy, the less potential for learning might be the case, no? Regarding paideia, this will now be argued by the fact that you do not only learn about the world through your own experiences, you learn through the involvement with others and the world. And for me to see this now raises the next question for it to be examined, which would be the questionnaire of this authenticity we have from Gadamer, and thereby the truthfulness of the statues. How can we really learn from history if the history is now a copy, no? Now, firstly, I will have to anecdote through conversations with most of the guests of the dives that they were very disappointed to understand that the statues were copies. They started saying that they understood less of the entire park, even though it's only the statues of the entire park that's copies, the rest is in situ. So they said they literally lost interest in the objects, learning that only the statues were copies. With inspiration from Gadamer's now phenomenology and his term of authenticity, I will propose that we can now approach maybe a new understanding of this paideia, of the higher education through the sympathy of lived experience. in the sense that Gadamer, he doesn't really connect the term authenticity with understanding tradition and then the fusion of these horizons in his philosophical hermeneutics. So to phrase it very simplified, I try to say that Gadamer's concept of authenticity is about being open to the influence of tradition and developing greater, deeper understanding through dialogue and interpretation. And thereby the concept can be understood in relation to underworld replica statues through his notion of understanding tradition and hopefully the fusion of these different horizons. Now, for Gadamer, this authenticity is not only tied to a fixed essence or originality, but emerges in the encounter between the interpreter and the art piece that I'm now allowing myself to call it because they are copies, shaped by the historical and cultural traditions. When we experience replicas as classic statues underwater, a new dialogue is created in which both the material, like the statues themselves, but also the sensory, the experience, this phenomenological experience of water now will play a central role. When we see a replica of statues underwater, we engage in a dialogue with both the original and the copy, and in the context they are experienced in through the phenomenological experience. Now, adding the paideia is about the formation and the education through encounters with cultural history. So when statues are replicas and placed underwater, it now changes our experience from them, creating a new horizon of understanding, where water will now function as the mediating factor and that alters both the visual and the bodily experiences, just as tradition always shapes our interpretation of the world. So now back to the copy versus original. Now for Gadamer, he would now argue that the authenticity itself does not depend on the originality, but on how we encounter and interpret the art pieces, the artworks, the copies, the statues. The replicas underwater thereby are not less authentic, they simply create a new understanding where the time and the place, the perception merge into this new experience. Now, before summing up or ending this talk, I really wish to empathize that I'm not looking for a conclusion for this. This is thought. This presentation manifests itself in thoughts and experiences I've encountered working in the submerged ecological park of Baia, and I would be very pleased if to hear if any of you would have comments for further this thinking experience that I'm playing around with here. Where I am in the process for now, be my conclusion, so to say, is that the experiencing of replica statues underwater, for me to see, changes our encounter with tradition art and creating like this new dialogue, past and present in between. And the underwater nomadic statue, however, these hierarchies, they dissolve in some way. These statues are no longer elevated on pedestals, but instead now being submerged, they are eroded and integrated into a shifting natural environment, no? So this transformation, this also decentralizes their authority, their monumental statues, making them part of more immersive and involving space rather than these fixed monuments of power. So the experience of engaging with them is no longer dictated into urban planning or political intent, but instead they are shaped by a bodily movements, water currencies, light reflection, reinforcing Gadamer's notion of how this notion of authenticity arises through interpretation and context rather than fixed or like being original. And through this process, we develop a more dynamic version of the paideia, in which we not only learn for the past and also interpret it with the new ways, not through this static monumental structures, but through a more bodily and situational encounters. And this is precisely for me to see at least, the very precise essence of Gadamer's view of the authenticity, where meaning is not imposed, but continuously, how can you say, negotiated in experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Camille. I think now again we heard another interesting aspect of underwater heritage. So thank you, Camille, for sharing your thoughts and your project with us. I would also like to thank you all the speakers in the same time for their wonderful presentations. We are really happy to be able to have a glimpse into the different aspects of underwater culture heritage through your presentations and projects. We are now going to open the floor to everyone for questions. So please either raise your hand with the Zoom hand emoji, or you can also write your questions in the chat box and we will read it out on your behalf. Of course, our speakers also more than welcome to ask questions from each other if they got inspired by each other projects as well. So please, everyone, the floor is now for everyone. And don't be shy to share your feedbacks or comments or anything, just anything what comes to your mind. Martijn, please. I think you're muted. Yeah.
I am muted. I was muted, and I was looking for the hand, and now I got it. I just wanted to show Camille something because this is what you get when you talk to me on WhatsApp. You know, this is a statue from Baye, so it shows how powerful the statue is underwater because there I'm an archaeologist, but this is the place where I make my photos because because it also stands for something, and it is so it's part of the context, it's part of a landscape, but it also stands for something. So I'm not so worried about the copies. Although I find your subject really interesting, and especially if you look at it also from the statues that come from the pedestals and they but usually those are the ones from the 19th century where when we were building nations. So that's the power. Those are the powerhouses, the things to join people together. And the other ones were for enjoyment. The smaller statues, the ones that you see in Baia. And so I am. So you said, if I understood well, you said that there were a lot of people that did not pay any, were not interested in the statues anymore because they were copies. That's what you said, right? And I'm quite surprised about that.
They were interested in the statues, but they said that they paid less interest in general for the general understanding of the area, getting to understand that the statues were copies. Then they found it less impressive, and so that's my main worry, no, because
Yeah.
of course.
But I understood. I always understood, but I might be completely wrong because I've worked in Baia also in the past, and but I always understood that the statues were more or less on the place where they were found. So for me, they represent something of the buildings behind it, of the villas behind it, and so they really add to my experiences underwater. So I think they are very, very valuable, and I know that they're copies, but I can understand that they're not underwater.
Yes, and they are absolute, like they are one to one. You cannot tell the difference between the copies and the originals. So it's the understanding, the knowing that they are not the original ones that destroy the illusion for people.
Yeah.
But they are obviously placed there for these recreational purposes. Yes.
But lucky you working there.
It's a wonderful place, really.
Amazing. Yes.
Thank you very much.
I think someone raised their hand there, but Yes,
Someone, there we
hello.
go.
I'm Borislava Manova. I'm a student studying architecture, and I was really interested if in suit method is not working is better to we build interventions in those underwater heritage sites so we can like showcase to more people, not only that are professional scuba divers or licensed ones, but is there a new method we can implement, but by maybe building structures?
Can you choose someone to ask this question from? Which speakers would you like to
Maybe
ask?
Martin?
Okay.
Yes, but you have to repeat it because you were talking about building structures for what exactly?
For better excavation and showcasing to more people and better access to those preservation sites.
Yeah, that's actually what we're doing. Baia is a very good example of a place where tourists can go. They go there being guided because you can also understand that when you have unguided diving on an archaeological site, that might go quite wrong, especially in places like that Baia where you have all these mosaic floors and probably there's a lot of archaeological objects still in the ground. But this is an underwater park where people can visit and people can see it. And there are more of them. So there is, for example, in Finland, they have a trail. They have in Portugal, they have a trail. In actually all over the world, they have places where you can go diving underwater. And I was looking at the thing in Danube. I don't know how deep it is, and I don't know how well the visibility in the Danube is, but I saw that multi-beam sonar picture of that fortress, and that must be amazing. I think that must be an amazing place to dive as well. So I don't know. Maybe that's also a place for tourism. Does that answer your question?
Yes, partially, because I was thinking more of like structure, not necessarily for divers, more like museum, like the Maritime Silk Road or White Crane Museum in China.
Yes, but then you have to bring the things up. And there are quite a few of maritime museums. There are some peculiar museums where you can walk out, where you can go down underwater. There is one indeed in China where, so in China you have a few Silk Road museums where the things have been brought up, or whole shipwrecks have been brought up, and that you can excavate. But that you can see, and that some of them are being still excavated underwater in the museum. So that's amazing. That's the Nanai one shipwreck. But there's also a place which has carvings in a dwelling, and that is underwater, and so people can walk basically underwater in a tunnel, so they can see the carvings underwater there. So there is all sorts of, well, trying to get people to the site, but it remains an activity that is only for a selected group of people. Either it is too expensive to enter, or you have to go diving, and that's complicated.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you for your question, Borislava. Does anyone else have some questions or comments or curious about something?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. So Alexandra, it was really interesting hearing about your company, and I think it's really interesting that you're a mix of kind of architects and researchers. And I'm curious to know on what basis you choose the things you work on. Like you started with a fountain. Is it, do local projects come to you with an idea, or is it kind of based on your own research? I'd love to know more about your methodology.
It's kind of a mix. The fountain was kind of random. I just went to the mayor and asked if why is it not working, and we started. I was in school back then, and me and my colleagues, we started working with our teachers and restorers who helped us voluntarily. And then for the island, we, of course, it's a really controversial subject here, and yeah, and also the Turkish community is not involved anymore. There are really a few people left here, and we just found out about this whole archive, really big, like 50 gigabytes of archive, and we were really interested in, yeah, finding it and seeing what we can do. And that's how we started. We got in contact with a person who kind of convinced the Institute of Heritage, the National Institute of Heritage, to digitalize it, and we then applied to some funding from the Order of Architects, and that's how we got to work with that. And we are still building on our project, but this year the new island is officially accessible through our NGO and the project. I hope.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might have another question for Alexandra as well. About the island itself. When I was looking into it just briefly, a lot of sources said that it was a multicultural island, basically. So I wanted to ask, how did you manage to preserve that aspect as well? Because every resources describe it as like a paradise or like an ideal place where all the cultures could live together. Do you have any space for this aspect in your project?
Yes, of course. I think that is the basis of our project, to keep so this new island that we are working with, in center of everything, we are trying to put the community, firstly the Turkish community, but also the new aspect and the new culture that intertwines with the Turkish community. So we are trying to build up another layer on top, and to make people feel like this is a place for everybody. But we have to be really, really precise and really delicate with the Turkish community subject, because yeah, there is a cemetery there that we want to preserve and work on, and maybe restore next year. We are trying to do that, and to make them feel like this is about them, and because there have been many projects before that didn't focus on the community and the culture and this part, but on the touristic, you know how it goes. So yeah, that's what we are trying now. Really hard to get to, I don't know, to have the trust of the Turkish community, just because many people have tried to do things, but yeah, it's we are getting there slowly.
Thank you. Anyone else for more questions? Martijn? You still have your hand. Yeah.
Yes. No, I had my hand up and I put it down, and now I put it up again because I still want to know, also to Alexandra, because what I understood from your presentation is that they inundate the area, so the whole island became underwater. But before that, they placed some parts of that, especially the bulwarks of the fort. They placed it onto another island. They did that. They rebuilt that. What was their purpose to do that? Because the island is not accessible, or nobody's going to the island. So why did they do such a basically crazy thing?
Yeah, such a big effort, right? To try to
Exactly.
and before that, just imagine they collaborated. So there is a really nice guy from the academy back then who organized this whole process to draw every house, the whole fortress and everything. And also we have the plants and the trees and the biodiversity. We have everything on paper. So we found out that it was a touristic project. Everybody thinks that they did this for the Turkish community, just okay, um, we are submerging your island, but look, we move your house to another island there. So of course they didn't buy that, and they left. Many of them left to Turkey, many of them left um, to Constanța, another city where there is the biggest community now in Romania. But that didn't work out because they just stopped their whole process. And and then it wasn't accessible for the last 50 years. It hasn't been accessible. And the council, the county council, they kind of thought that they need a big project like master plan to make it accessible again, and for people to be interested in visiting the new island. But we tried to let them know that you can start slow and from nothing. I mean, from just visiting what is there, that is enough. And we are trying to, make a little map and for people to discover the reality of the current situation.
Thank you.
Welcome. Can I ask something to Martin, because we found a team that could help us with this, but we are now thinking that maybe we could also collaborate and we could talk sometime about this subject, how to scan this kind of heritage, even though ours is much older and it's not Roman, or it doesn't have that much of a yeah, old history, but we are really interested in your and Camille's process. We think if when we discovered that these things exist and people really do that and they really work with heritage underwater, we were just it's amazing.
Yeah, we have well, actually there are a few of my students also in the group now listening to the presentations. So I think it would be a very nice case for us to look at from the university and to see what could be a good scenario for you to do, and to have some talks with you about this, and then to develop something to help you out and to see whatever you could do. So I'm fascinated, and I have to tell you, it's one of the most amazing multi-beam sonars that I have seen in my life. It's really amazing what there is on the seabed. On the riverbed, sorry, and but you see also erosion patterns already existing along the island, the little island. But it's a fascinating place, and we are happy to help you out. Maybe not tomorrow, but in a few weeks we can do that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we were thinking maybe in a river, maybe it's really, really hard from the visibility point of view. We will see.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you.
this. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to collaborate together. That's one of the reasons why we organize these kind of events. So it's really wonderful to see that you found each other, and I hope all of our speakers could work together at some point in the future, including our guest, of course, because it's open for our guest as well. So as I mentioned before, we're going to send the contact for your projects in a follow-up email after the presentation, after the event. And we're going to edit this video recording, and going to upload to the YouTube channel of ESACH as well. So you're going to get hopefully all the information for everything. So with that being said, I would like to give a final thank you for everyone. If no one else have other questions, anyone else? Okay. No questions. Right. So I would like to give a final thank you to all of our speakers tonight who gave up their time to be here. I know it's not an easy it's not easy given to your busy schedules and given to your other occupations and projects. So we really appreciate that. On the behalf of the program team, I would also like to thank the rest of the ESACH coordination team who supported our work and offered guidance to us. I would like to thank you to Sophia and Anna again to help me with the moderation tonight. And please don't forget to keep an eye on our social media accounts for all the details of future ESACH Talks events and other relevant ESACH events as well. We encourage you to become a member of our community, obviously, and sign up to our newsletter to receive more updates on upcoming events, projects, and conferences and workshops, and all the good things what connect us together. So on that note, I would like to say thank you once again for this super interesting discussion tonight. And we hope to see you again in our next talk session. So thank you for your time, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. So I think we can wait maybe one more minute, a little bit, to see if there are more people coming.